moment. So you can either speak or there are the reaction buttons at all if you on the bottom. I've learned this through my Zoom.
No.
Nope. Good.
No.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
Resolution number 1, moved by myself, second by Andrew Poirier, that the agenda of the regular Kenora Police Services Board for the May 22nd, 2020 meeting be hereby approved as presented.
Wonderful. Can I get a seconder?
Sure.
They're already in the resolution, Sarah. So Dan read it, moved by and seconded by.
Okay, my copy. Oh, I see on the top. My apologies. I didn't grab that. So seconded by Andrew Poirier. Okay. So Heather, do you want me to sign these at all, or do you want me to sign them electronically and send them to you?
I had asked you in the email if you could sign them and then just have someone drop them in our mail slot if that's convenient.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I clearly missed that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem.
Perfect. So thank you very much. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. Carrie, thank you. No, we have no presentations, no delegations. Is that correct, Heather? I didn't see any. Okay.
No, we have one media partner with us so far, but that is it.
Okay. So minutes of the previous meeting, around the January 24th meeting minutes. And so can I have somebody speak to the resolution?
Yeah, they're assigned to members.
So Dave?
Okay, is it me? I see, I've got this screen. I can't get anything else up in front of me.
So
Do you want,
go ahead.
sorry, do you want me to, I'm seconding it. Do you want me to move it then?
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Was I on there to move it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move it.
So the resolution reads, moved by Dee Canfield, seconded by Andrew Poirier, the minutes of the last regular meeting of the Kenora Police Services Board held January 24th, 2020 be confirmed and written as circulated.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Perfect, okay. The next is the business arising from the minutes. So primary casual factors in fatal motor vehicle accidents, reporting 0. Jeff, any updates there?
No updates there as far as the new report. COVID's kind of put that on hold, so I'm hoping there'll be a new police service board report shortly, a new format.
Thank you. Any questions for Jeff around that? No? Okay. Strategic plan, development plan. So Heather and I did meet prior to COVID to talk about a plan. Heather's smiling. We actually had a good plan.
Feels like forever ago, to be honest.
So we had actually developed a potential implementation plan before, but obviously with COVID that has stopped everything. But Heather, you had some suggestions. Or is this section totally on hold?
Yeah, that the strategic plan section's on hold. We're gonna get, when we get further down into the agenda, just the items on hold that I have at the end, I can just touch on those a little bit after the new business.
Okay, great. So does anybody have any questions on that? We have nothing to present to you today because of COVID-19, but we did discuss it prior to. So we'll just keep it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The performance review of the detached commander, this is on hold as well, obviously, because Jeff is extremely busy with COVID-19. So we will just table that. And the next is the OPP response to 911 calls. So I'm assuming, Jeff, this is you?
I think this can probably come off, right, Jeff? Because now there's been that change.
Yeah, so that there has been a change in our response to 911 calls. They have dropped off exponentially. We don't get hardly any anymore. So that hopefully will be reflected in the billing costs. So that is done, and we're saving a lot of time not responding to them. So yeah. The other thing I was going to say too, just touching around I know it's the board strategic plan, but our new plan, our 2020 to 2022 strategic plan is out, and I will send that to Heather once I can get an electronic copy of it. It looks completely different than past years. having a new commissioner and, you know, it just looks completely different. It looks really good. So it is here, and I'll send that out once I can get an electronic copy of it.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Any comments for Jeff around the OPP response to 911 calls? It's great to see that has come down, Jeff, with that initiative. No? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. Receipt of correspondence. So we have a resolution, and Whitney, I think you're up for this one. Do you have it there?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time opening two screens at the same time as well. It's not very...
Okay, resolution number 3 moved by Whitney, seconded by Dave Canfield, that the following correspondence be hereby received by the Kenora Police Services Board. I'm not going to read them all. It goes from January 24th to May 13th. As listed on the agenda.
Okay, so seconded by Dave, and all in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful, thank you. So moving on to new business. So update from the regional roundtable session. And I'm assuming was this the one in Toronto that we attended, Heather?
Yes.
Because I know there was one in Kenora that I fell ill, so I was unable to attend, but.
Which was exactly the duplicate of the one we went to in Toronto.
So that was some time ago, but Heather and I did receive some very good information specifically around strategic planning process for the board and what actually needs to be within the plan, and also ensuring that there is community consultation. What was part of our conversation, Heather and I, is how to sort of do that engagement piece with community. And then one of the things that we took away specifically from that session, if I recall correctly, Heather, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that there has to be very specific indicators developed within our strategic plan. And it doesn't have to be too many, that specifically deal with vulnerable populations that our community is facing. So that's what I took away from it, Heather. Anything you want to add that you recall?
I think there was a lot of discussion around the future of, police services board, sizes of boards, the changes that were coming. And I mean, that whole consultation piece was really, as they went around the region and talked to all the different areas, I think there was a lot of good conversation around, again, it goes back to that may work well in the south or in other parts of the province, but not necessarily here. So there was a lot of discussion around, just board sizes, composition, how you put those together, what it looks like when there's close regions. Just a lot of discussion around the changes to the act, how the province is going to frame those changes, because the way the wording is in the act, it's kind of left to determine future, and that's why the ministry was doing so much consultation.
So any questions from any board member around?
So as question of that, Jeff, you might know is I'm assuming that Suneros will become part of this board?
Do you want to answer that, Sarah, or Jeff might want to, but the way those discussions were held, that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
And Jeff may want to add more to that.
Yeah, so I did go to the consultation meetings that were in Kenora, and they really haven't defined, if there's going to be one board for the detachment area or not. If there isn't going to be just one board, if there's going to be more than one, then we have to justify why we want two boards. And when I talked to Norbert in Suneros, I would rather have two boards because their issues are a lot different than our issues here in Kenora, but that does also mean that we're going to need basically two of everything. So 2 community safety well-being plans, 2 strategic reports. So it'll be a little more work on their end, but theirs should be pretty straightforward. So I think we can have 2 boards, and I think we can justify why we have 2 boards. But when we get to that, we'll certainly cross that bridge when we get to it, because no decisions have been made yet.
No, that's good, because that's kind of why I asked, because back, we were discussing this a long time ago at AMO, and the fact was that, the one size doesn't fit all. You're right. There's big differences between the two. They're they're still a fair ways away from us. It's not like down south where the communities are next door to each other.
Yeah, and a lot of that discussion started down south because some detachments have 10 police service boards.
Yeah.
So those are the ones they want to amalgamate. But for us, we meet monthly, and in Sioux Narrows, we meet quarterly. So, I mean, that's not a onerous task for me to travel around or do these meetings. So.
Good.
Especially with Zoom now, Jeff.
You can just zoom right down there.
So any questions for Heather, myself, or Jeff? Okay, hearing none, thank you. We'll move on to the AMO discussion paper input. And so we have until the 28th, I believe, to provide some input into any questions or concerns that the board has around the information that was provided. So I hope everybody's had a chance to take a look at the document that was sent in the package.
Yeah, I think I read that twice. The AMO one that Matt Wilson was in it. Some of this stuff that I printed here come out half. I'm not sure if I got that here or not, but it. I think I can remember most of it anyway. The one concern I had there was the DSAB participation.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, unless something has changed drastically, that's an absolute no. We've already built a monster from something that started out small, and I'm not saying they don't do good work. What you're doing is if to put this stuff into the DSAB, you're just going to build a bigger monster. I could spend hours on this, but I won't.
No, that's good because we have to put our concerns together by the 28th. So we'll definitely note that, Dave. And so Heather, I'm just referring to you. You'll put some notes together around this so we can respond.
I can. Councillor Poirier has his hand up. If you can.
Perfect. I did see that. My apologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah. So just what Dave brought up, that was a lengthy discussion yesterday in a DSAB meeting, because if there's no interest at that on that side of the equation or at that level, then this becomes almost a moot point. And I know there's going to be a response sent back in by the Kenora District Service Board. And I'm just going to tell you what I said, and I'm not in support of that. And I would suspect when the communication comes out in the letter, there's not really an appetite for taking on any more roles or responsibilities. They have enough to deal with now. It may work in other jurisdictions, but I think in our area, it's just from the general discussion, there wasn't any interest whatsoever to pursue that. So if the DSAB isn't going to pursue it on one side, I really think once something goes in saying that we're not interested, I think it probably is going to become a dead issue.
Thanks, Andrew.
So my sensing from the board then that the support is, or our responsible focus around participation from or involvement of the DSAB is not supported. Is there any other comments on behalf of the board that should be provided?
I have a few, but Jeff, do you want to weigh in on that conversation at all around the DSAP involvement?
No, I mean, it is whatever the board decides.
Okay, a couple of things is in regards to the legislation that was passed, it clearly indicates that all municipalities will have the contracts, and we can't find ours. Is that correct?
The OPP contract?
Yeah.
No, we have ours. That was passed by council in December. I provided it to the Police Services Board in January. It was on our agenda. I attached it to the agenda. I think we even discussed it. We talked about what we talked about at council, what was presented. They presented to us, the board, in December, and then they presented to council. And we executed the agreement and sent it back. I don't have a fully executed copy back, but the OPP's been in contact with me just explaining due to COVID, it takes forever to get stuff back from them on a normal process. So right now things are slowed down even more. So I just received a follow-up confirmation just a couple of weeks ago that said, we apologize, it's taking so much longer. But I do have a copy that's been executed on our end.
Perfect. Can we receive a copy of that again, Heather?
Yeah, sure. It's the same as the one that we discussed in January. It's just it's signed on our end. Just
Sure.
not on
I think as these things are coming up specifically around strategic planning, it would be good to have a copy of that just to sort of reference.
Sure.
It also indicates improving the quality of existing governance and civilian oversight in the system. So I just want to sort of maybe approach that conversation around civilian oversight into the system, because it talks a lot about provincial appointees, removing provincial appointees, making it more local context. So do we have any feedback that we want to present around that?
I know in our meetings with Solgen and the government, once the new boards are formed, there'll be no provincial appointees because it takes too long. And the government realizes that, so that's just a way to streamline appointees. And then they want the boards to be reflective of the community we serve. And I think the only, I think it would be good to have an Indigenous influence in our board at some point. So that's maybe something we can look at in the future when they decide on how big these boards are going to be and so forth.
Any comments at all from anybody around that?
No, I agree. I think that's a great idea. If that's a possibility of getting someone who's on the board.
So Heather, maybe we can just note that as a support.
Okay.
The other was just, sorry, go ahead. Somebody else had a comment?
Sarah, I would echo Whitney's comments. I think it's important that we, as we expand or change over, that we have representation from the Indigenous. I think it just goes a long way into, we're doing that in pretty well every direction we're going. You look at the All Nations Hospital Board, there's such a big part of the whole policing. So I think it's imperative that we expand that. So.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Dan, you're looking more like Boris Johnson every day.
Yeah, thanks. My wife said the same thing.
Another was, and Jeff, maybe you can comment a little bit about this. One of the principles that they indicated was that OPP detachment board operation costs should be provincially supported through training and grants and be equitably distributed between municipalities. So Heather, I don't know if you can weigh in here. Do we receive anything in regards to training and grants at the moment for boards?
Not for boards, no.
That was a concern brought forward from Red Lake and Pickle Lake, that, if the boards do expand to a bigger size, it's just one more thing that's been downloaded to municipalities. And that was their concern. So there was a lot of talk about the boards not getting any official training and how that looks and if it's online to save costs. But it was definitely noted that the government should step up and give municipalities money to run police service boards. So it was noted by the government representation that we had. So hopefully that will be something that will come with the new act as well.
Sorry.
They did echo at our roundtable session there, Sarah, when we were in Toronto, about that was a concern of, there's going to be this mandatory annual training for police services board. What is that going to look like and who's going to pay for it? Police service board budgets are already extremely limited as it is, and it's the municipality funding it 100%. So if they were going to initiate mandatory training for board members, they needed to follow through with the funding for that training.
So I obviously would be in support of that principle as well. So can we highlight that as well in our comments? And the last comment I had just for some discussion was around the memorandum of understanding from with the Ministry of Attorney General on transfer agreements between municipalities, which govern the Provincial Offences Act administration and fine revenue distribution, may need to be updated depending on local circumstance. So, Jeff, can you weigh in on that? What does this really mean?
I think that Heather can probably weigh on that from the provincial offenses side, but I think what that just means is that the revenue sharing from the provincial offense notices that are written in the city, making sure they get their fair share of that. I don't know how that works now, but I know the city runs all the PON courts and stuff like that. So,
Heather?
So right now, we are responsible. So my provincial offenses area, court area is Red Lake, Sioux Narrows, Nestor Falls, and Kenora. So my provincial offenses courts, we have a revenue sharing as well as a cost sharing. So because I send staff to Red Lake to have courts, to operate the courts, we receive that revenue, but we also share that revenue with, it's in proportion based on population size. So again, the costs that go with it is supposed to offset, but whether it does or doesn't reflect the actual costs is another discussion.
So then we're clearly in support that that needs to be updated to reflect some of those areas in our region. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Those were the comments that I had from the material. Any other comments? No. Okay, hearing none. So Heather, if you could put that together, and then we can respond with our concerns in our support, and just make sure that that's forwarded to them by the 28th. That would be greatly appreciated. All right, the next is around community safety and well-being plan updates from Solgen. So there was some correspondence that was sent dated April the 24th, indicating that due to COVID-19 on April the 14th, there was amendments to the act in regards to the deadline that is no longer January 1st of 2021, but there is no new date. Is that correct? Did I miss that at all, Heather, around when these are due?
No, all they've done is say that it's been extended. I mean, just from our perspective, the city's it's still a project that we're actively working on. We have a staff member that's assigned to it. What's going to be missing is the community piece to it, right? We had already started our process. We were at the stage where we were now doing the consultation part. So that's been on hold. As far as the actual development of the plan, we're still continuing working on that internally.
Great. Any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the release from custody issues and OPP response. So I know Jeff has been doing a lot of work in regards to this. So if you can just provide some comments, Jeff, around this.
sure. So I don't think it's any surprise. It's been in the news. It's been widely published that due to COVID-19, the jails and the courts are looking at releasing people from custody into the community, and we've had a number of those people released from the jail here. The jail's population is significantly lower than it ever has been. So for us, I mean, that means we have to manage these people in the community, and we have concerns about some of the people they have released so far. A lot of those people are back in custody, but so what we've done, we've been talking a lot to Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay has a process set up where they run it basically like a risk table. Anytime somebody's going to get released, they bring all the partners together. But what we've done here is we've come up with a form that has to be filled out by Defense Counsel with the release plan. And then that plan gets sent to us to vet and to look at. So things like addresses they're going to be released to, people that reside there, who owns the house, because a lot of the issues we've been having is people are released into social houses that are not owned by the person that lives there, and their leases actually say they can't have guests for more than 10 days. So that's working its way through the process. It's currently with the duty counsel's office to look at, and they've farmed it out to some other defense councils in Kenora. I would anticipate that will go through and we'll start using that here shortly, just so that we have a say. And it's ultimately the justice of the peace decision whether they release or not. But we will have a say on the residence that the person is released to. We've seen everything from people getting released back into community to victims' houses, to houses across the street from the occurrence, where witnesses are, things like that. So this form that will be filled out by defense counsel or whoever's running the bail hearing will allow us to actually vet that before it goes through. So if our recommendation is that the person shouldn't be released on that plan, they can still run a bail hearing, but will likely be called to testify why they shouldn't be released on that plan. So that's where we're at with that. And like I said, it's at the defense counsel's table. So I'm hoping we'll hear more with that early next week.
So any comments from the board around? No. Okay, thanks very much, Jeff.
I do, but I won't say them.
Okay, Dave. Items that are on hold for 2020 is the Police Services Board Annual Report to Council, Business Plan, Community Meeting, and Community Survey. Anything on there, Heather, that you want to speak to? Items or
Just
no?
other than, we had talked about, Sarah, you and I had met and we had discussed about what that, annual report to council would look like. And we had kind of target dates already selected, which have long passed. We didn't even have the council meetings when we had kind of thought we were going to. And we did, you and I went back and forth on a draft community survey, which again, we had picked some preliminary June dates for a public meeting, which now are again put on hold. So at some point, depending on how this situation progresses, we may want to talk about some sort of community presentation in this format where, the board presents to the public, where there just wouldn't be that opportunity for the back and forth, or some sort of format of a community meeting, or moving forward with a community survey. But that would be up to the board and obviously the board chair what they want to do.
All right, so let's have that discussion. Does anybody have a preference on the options that Heather provided? Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So I believe because it kind of fits in well with COVID-19, the whole idea of a survey, because we were probably going to do it online. I'm assuming we were going to do that. So I'm just wondering, before we go to the next steps, if we should be looking at doing that survey, and that can form part of the presentation that's made either to council or back to the community. So I'm just wondering if some, and I'm not trying to put more work on you either, Heather, but I'm just wondering if we should be looking at doing that in the near to midterm, and then deal with how we would present it to the public and then to council. And that, I mean, we still have council meetings now, and it's just a matter of presentations being through Zoom and electronic and not in person. So I'm just wondering if we should start with the survey.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Are we in agreement with that approach? I am. Okay,
Okay, so
I'll even help with it too if you want, because I'm quite I have a lot of time on my hands right now. So
you want to go door to door? So Sarah and I had gone through a draft. We went back and forth, and what the intent was to circulate at the next Police Services Board meeting, but here we are. That was a few months ago. So what I can do is circulate the draft, and have council, I apologize, board members have some input prior to, and then I'll send it to Jeff for his comments. He's probably going to remove number 1 to 15, and there'll be 3 questions left. No, I'm kidding. But I'll send it to Jeff after the board has reviewed it and see if there are any further comments, and then we can put it together. It's I spent a bit of time doing some research on looking at different community surveys that have been done around policing, and that's where the questions were really driven from. So I'm not going to, sit and say, oh, I developed all these myself. Really, they had already been done in other communities. So keep that in mind when you're reading them over, as that's kind of where they've been driven from.
Okay.
We can get that process going relatively quickly. Carrie is great at, flowing through community surveys and outreach, and we have lots of great ways to get it out into the community. And right now we have a whole lot of followers through our social media. So I know that we'll be able to reach a lot of people. And as Councillor Poirier alluded to, people have more time on their hands than they've had prior. So hopefully we'll have a decent response rate.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heather. So we'll send that around and for comment, and then we can proceed with posting. So hearing no other comments, we'll move on to the Detachment Commander's report. So Jeff, in regards to the reports, what we had decided was to sort of do some high-level highlights and areas that you wanted our attention, and then some questions, because we've all had a chance to review it prior to the meeting today. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. I was going to share it here on screen, but if there's really there really is no highlights. Everything is down except for sexual assaults. So
Yes,
I can certainly go through it. What I will mention is that the municipal revenue portion, because of COVID-19, of course, is not available. But we are still doing a small amount of criminal record checks for healthcare service providers. Otherwise, we're not doing any of that stuff. And with COVID-19, they've actually sped up the process to get this to an online process, which is a win for COVID-19. So hopefully that will happen by the time we're out of this. But the revenue is not available on this report. The estimated cost, nothing's really changed. You'll see our calls for service for April are 1,387. And I'll talk about that when we get into the historical data a little bit. So calls for service virtually in the first quarter are down by over 600, which is a good thing for us. Can everybody see the document itself?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
I actually have them all printed out, and they come out before I ran out of ink.
Okay. So looking at the violent crime, again, our sexual assaults are up for the month of April, and they're up. That's the only violent crime that's up for the year. And the anomaly for sexual assaults, we had 11 in February, so that's why they're up for the year. 1 cleared by charge, 2 unfounded, and 2 with insufficient evidence to proceed makes up the 5. You'll see our assaults are down, our theft overs are up, and that relates to some cell phones that were stolen and some bank accounts that were accessed, and just some thefts of some bigger ticket items. So theft over is anything over $5,000, which these days doesn't take much. Theft unders are down significantly from last April, and mischiefs are up a little, but like Andrew said, some people have more time on their hands now. So mischief, graffiti, some slash tires, that sort of thing, but nothing really of any significance at all. You'll see our drug crimes are up, and that's solely because we have more people working on those types of occurrences. So we have 4 full-time community street crime members now, where we just had 2 before, and they're doing some really excellent work in the area of methamphetamine, guns, and property. So I don't know, we're going to be getting out some media releases here, hopefully on some bigger seizures that they've just made. But some of those investigations are ongoing, so we can't get them out just yet. But we hope to do that by midsummer. So clearance rates, again, 72% for violent crime, 38.2% for property crimes. And just moving on, you'll see the criminal record and vulnerable sector screening checks. So down significantly. Again, that's because we're not actually doing them right now, only for healthcare providers or hospital staff or essential frontline workers. And really, as far as that report goes, the only other thing I'll touch on is the last page of it. So you'll see, again, the number of cruiser patrol hours is up 946.5. Again, less calls for service, more cruiser patrol hours, and our foot patrol hours at 82 hours for April. And with the nice weather and warmer weather, we've actually gone to a targeted enforcement plan. I'm hoping though that number will be up over 100 come May here, because we have specific people assigned per day to foot patrol. And subject to any questions, that's kind of the high level summary of that report anyway. And
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff on that presentation first, before he goes into the historical data?
Nope.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, hearing none, Jeff, please proceed.
okay, so I just pulled up the historical data for everybody to see. I know everybody has it in front of them, but again, calls for service. So for the first 4 months, just over 5,000, which, you know, we're getting back into the 2016-17 numbers, which is really good for us. And with the fact that we have, well, in March, all of our vacation was canceled, and a lot of people are just canceling their vacation because they can't go anywhere. All of our training has been canceled right up until likely, you know, July, August. And they've actually so far have canceled most of our block training. So we've got an exemption in the EMPCA to just move into training in September. So anybody that expires this year, it's actually just been carried over until September. So less calls, more people, again, a lot more proactive work being done. We have of course, with no schools going on right now, we have our community service officers that are doing a lot of proactive work, either foot patrol or patrols that we never had a chance to do before. So you've likely seen our ATVs driving around town. They've been hitting most of the local trail system, recovering a lot of stolen property from those trail systems. So that's a real plus for us. We also have our local in-service training unit, and that's 4 members that are working with us on shifts or during the week when we need them. So like I said, other than sexual assaults that are up from 16 year to date to 22 last year and this year, everything else is relatively down, speaking in numbers. So everything is there for your viewing. If you have any questions, I'll certainly be able to answer them. As far as the impaired driving goes, again, that's because they changed the section number. But when I ran them yesterday, we have 16 year-to-date total, and I'll update the rest of this running the new section number so that we'll have those numbers for everybody. So yeah, that's it. Subject to any questions, that's the 2 reports I have for you. I also have a behavioral mental health screener. I know I didn't put that in the last reports that I sent out. So I ran our mental health calls for service from January to the end of April, which is 103 occurrences, 99 of which had the behavioral mental health screener. And I can tell you that our mean time in the emergency department is going up to 3 hours and 11 minutes. which is up from like 2.5 hours. So that's something that I'll be addressing with the hospital. If I can ever get a meeting there, I will certainly do that. And we'll be reviewing our transfer of care, because the goal is to have us in and out of there in 60 minutes. And that's a provincial target that's been set by the government. So I will certainly be having those meetings in the near future. I think some of the important numbers here are, of the 99 people we actually took to hospital, only 19 of which were admitted. So that's a significant number for us. And I can tell you that our adult mobile crisis team, we have identified a member from Kenora. He's already started. And I know CMHA Kenora will be having interviews in the next 2 weeks to put that social work piece together. And once that's together and somebody's hired, then that team will be operational. So we'll have a youth team and an adult team, and they'll likely work opposite shifts. So we have 7-day-a-week coverage. So that's definitely a positive for us. And again, the goal is to try and offer the services in the community instead of going to the hospital and waiting for 3 hours and 11 minutes for each person that goes there. Because that 3 hours and 11 minutes means 2 officers are tied up there for over 3 hours. So we're hoping to do a lot more of that work in the community and do a lot more proactive work when it comes to that. So that is all I have for you today, unless you have any other questions.
Any
Had
questions? Sorry, go ahead.
Question or comment. So, you know, the gatherings of more than 5 people are still being restricted. I assume the city beaches and parks are still closed. I walk quite frequently now with my free time, and I've noticed since the weather picked up, there's been a ton of people at Garrow. When I walked by the other day, there was probably about 20 people swimming on the beach, laying in the sand. So I'm just wondering if, you know, during hot days and if that's something that's not being permitted, if patrol could be increased during, you know, the peak hours. I typically walk by around between 5 and 5:30, and there's been people there almost every day the last little bit.
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of those calls, and we're responding to them. So if they're ongoing, the officers will respond to them, and we'll do education, discretion, and enforcement is our last means of dealing with these. And we've only had to turn to enforcement once, and there's a huge backstory to that, but there was a lot of education, a lot of discretion done. So as far as that goes, if it's happening, certainly anybody can give us a call and the officers will respond. If it's something that is historic or not happening at the moment, then our field support unit will look after that from Thunder Bay. They'll be making phone calls and educating people and doing all that stuff. And as far as the businesses go, any complaints about businesses come straight to me, and I deal with those on a case-by-case basis. And I can tell you that a lot of the calls that I've been getting, the businesses have been really good about, you know, if we can't open, we won't open, but, you know, we want to open, how can we do it? And we've been able to work through, well, hundreds of scenarios with different businesses and marinas and campgrounds and that sort of thing. So in that perspective, it's been going really well. And as you know, unfortunately, our updates come from the media releases that are done every day because the government doesn't let us know ahead of time. So people see the media conferences that go on and then they're calling right away. Whereas we need about a day or two just to catch up and get direction from the OPP on how we're going to enforce that. So other than that, it's been going well. I've been getting a lot of calls from people that are outside of that 50-kilometer zone from Manitoba to see if that can be extended, and that has nothing to do with us. It's the Manitoba government that's given leeway to people to travel, you know, 50 kilometers outside of the Manitoba border, or else they're being directed to self-isolate for 14 days. So we do have some campgrounds that are outside of that 50-kilometer radius, and I've turned them back to our local MPP for, you know, for his input to the Manitoba government. So.
Any other questions for Jeff? All right, sorry, was there another question? No, okay. Hearing none, I do have a resolution. Andrew?
Okay, thank you. So resolution number 4, moved by myself, seconded by Whitney, that the Kenora Police Service Board hereby accepts the Kenora OPP monthly reports for the months of January, February, March, April 2020 as presented. So we don't have to modify that at all, do we, Heather? No.
No, okay. So, and it's seconded by Whitney. So
Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you very much. And thank you, Jeff. So our next meeting date is June 25th at 9 a.m. virtually again. And everybody should have that in the calendar because Heather has sent that around. So thank you. So we will now move to adjournment for a closed session. So I do have a resolution.
It's Dave again, so
Oh, Dave,
moved
Yeah.
by D. Canfield, seconded by D. Raynard, that in accordance with subsection 35(4), the Police Services Act, authorization is now given for the Police Service Board to adjourn a closed session at 9:51 a.m. under section B, intimate financial or personal matters, 2 items.
seconded by, okay, you said okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Andrew, all in favor, I hope?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Carries. Okay, wonderful. So we will,
Just Sarah, just before we close, I know we do have the media on the line, and if they have any questions, I can certainly be contacted at the office after we're done our meeting. And if they want to talk about any of the reports or anything like that, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, Zara had asked, and I just told her to contact you directly following the meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. So we will
We'll
move
just,
it.
if you could just link in, click the second link for the closed session, and we'll end this one, okay?
Oh,
Okay.
there's a second link?
Yep, there's a second link in your email which provides you to the closed session.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.